Time now for another vlog. And if you have a vlog suggestion that I have yet to do, be sure and check the vlog playlist first. It's kind of long over the past 2 years, I think going on 3 now. So I've done a few, but look through the playlist, and if you still have a suggestion or a topic you think would be a good vlog, feel free and send it my way, either below in the comments section, via Twitter, Facebook, Discord, one of those 3, whichever one, well, 4, I can't count. Twitter, Facebook, Discord, comment section. Yes, I forgot about the comment section. That does exist still on YouTube for now, until YouTube censors us all and prevents us from having any remaining free speech. I think I did a vlog about that already. Anyways, if it's also a vlog that is kind of sort of personal, you can send that to me as well, either via DM. You know the drill. Facebook DM, Twitter DM, Discord DM. Can be any topic, but if you want to be anonymous, you can send it to me that way. So that's how you send me vlogs, via all the various social medias to the Go Burns Nation. I know I disappointed some of you last week because you have gotten used to me posting 3 vlogs. I mean, a vlog every 3 weeks. But I didn't post one last week. I apologize. I did not have an idea for a vlog. I'm sorry. But good news! Sedan over on Discord did have an idea. Thank you, Sedan. Let's see. Dealing with disappointment, learning how to overcome what happens when other people let you down, address things like forgiving and forgetting those who disappoint, possibly less disappointment, and more being let down by other people. Like, he cites some video games like Mafia 3, Red Dead Online being great examples of things that let us down. Well, I did throw video games on my list of things regarding disappointment, but I think it's not exactly at the top of the list, but there's definitely a wide variety of things that we look forward to, or we come to depend on, or rely on, or trust in, believe in, that ends up disappointing us in some form or fashion. So let's go over that fun list. First off, let's see, friends, peers, co-workers, fellow students, especially friends. Like, you've gotten to know somebody over the years. Maybe they're not your best friend, or maybe they are your best friend, or maybe they're just an acquaintance that you like. And one day, for whatever rhyme or reason, they end up disappointing you. It sucks, but unfortunately, it's part of life. And some people have their reasons for disappointing others. Sometimes their own life interferes with plans that you may have made with them, like family, their job, other obligations. Like, for example, let's just say you and a friend of yours is planning on, getting together for a burger one day, right? You haven't seen a friend in a few months, and you're like, hey, let's go get a burger. And they're like, sure, let's go grab a burger. And it's something you do every now and then. But about an hour or 2 before you were supposed to go grab a burger, they message you and they're like, hey, I can't go get a burger today. I've got to work. I've got something come up. That's disappointing. But it's understandable because that's real life. But there's definitely worse ways that you can be disappointed by a friend. Say, for example, you confide in a friend or even a coworker about, say, an issue you have. Say you have maybe a disability, or you have a phobia, or you have a quirk, or maybe it's something else, like your sexual orientation. Maybe you feel like you can confide in them about that, and maybe it's something not everyone knows about you, or maybe it's something else entirely. I'm just throwing out some random things that some people would tell somebody else in confidence, and you expect them to keep that between you and them, but then later on you find out that your so-called friend or coworker went blabbing about it, gossiping, like. And then you feel disappointed in them because you thought you could trust them, you thought you could tell them something, Even if it's something small, like there's a fellow employee that you have a crush on, or the opposite. There's a boss or a manager over you that you don't like. And then it turns out they go and they tell the manager that you said something about them behind their back, even though it was supposedly in confidence, and you get a warning or a pink slip or whatever. Therefore, you're disappointed in that coworker that you thought you could talk to about almost anything and confide in. And what you told him might have been in the heat of the moment, and you were angry about something that the person above you did for whatever rhyme or reason, justified or unjustified. But unfortunately, your trust in your fellow employee was broken because they went to that person that you were bitching about and told them. Now, a lot of times you don't get a warning in that situation. Well, it depends on the severity of it, right? Sometimes you get a warning, and sometimes you get your ass fired. So my advice is, if you have beef with somebody in particular, either A, try to resolve it with that person, or B, keep it to yourself. Don't trust your coworkers, and that might be a good idea. But anyway, so there's different ways that friends, family. Well, we haven't gotten to family yet. There's different ways that peers and friends and acquaintances, coworkers, fellow students can disappoint you. And I guess the worst way is to betray you in some form or fashion, whether it's telling others a secret that you happen to have. Say you have a crush on a girl in your class, right? And you tell another classmate that you have, you guys are just talking in passing. But you feel uncomfortable telling the girl you have a crush on her, or the guy that you have a crush on him. It could be either way. And then you tell this person you thought you could confide in about it, and then all of a sudden your entire class knows, and it's a running joke that you have a crush on so-and-so. That can disappoint us and hurt us because you thought you could trust this person. And it's obviously somebody you have a crush on that probably isn't interested in you in any form or fashion. But, it does happen, sadly. And it does make people a lot more hesitant to confide or trust in people. It doesn't mean everybody's going to be like that. There are a select few friends out there that you can tell them almost anything, even something like, I killed somebody in Reno just to watch them die. And there's a very good possibility that your friend will never tell anybody. Then again, if you killed somebody and it wasn't in self-defense and it was just in cold blood, then maybe your friend should tell somebody. I'm just saying. But moving forward with things to be disappointed about, different, topics, degrees, friends to family. Sometimes this can be better or worse. Well, I wouldn't say it's better. Sometimes it can be worser. It depends on the family member, right? If it's somebody that you didn't really think much of anyways, like a cousin or a sibling or a parent or a grandparent or an uncle, an aunt that you weren't really close with, and you hear that they did something that had a negative effect on the rest of the family or somebody else in the family that you actually like and respect and care for, then there's a degree of disappointment when it comes to that. An example I could probably cite of disappointment when it comes to family is, I'll go ahead and mention my dad. My dad was not a perfect father. He was not the worst father in the world. He tried his best, but he was far from perfect. But the reality is, most parents are far from perfect, and parents make mistakes. They're not perfect. But there were plenty of occasions when my dad was supposed to pick me up from various things, and I was left sitting outside of school, outside of driver's ed, outside of the bowling alley, waiting for my dad to pick me up. And 10 minutes went by, 20 minutes, 30 minutes went by, and finally an hour would go by. And that, in my opinion, is a disappointment. And that happened to me a few times. Well, for one thing, Dad was, he worked, he was self-employed. And, he did the best he could, barely making money, trying to survive. But it still sucks that your own parents have a way of disappointing you to varying degrees. That's just one of several examples. And sometimes the disappointment is a small thing, like you really, really wanted something for your birthday, or you really wanted something for Christmas, and you expected your parents to get it for you, but the reality is your parents may not have been able to afford to get you the new bicycle or a new video game console or something else entirely, and you ended up getting, say, some clothes or like a board game instead of a video game, and you're disappointed in your parents because they didn't get you what you want. But the truth is, they were probably trying their best. It's just that they couldn't afford that $60 for that video game you wanted, or they couldn't afford, $300 or $400 for that video game console you wanted, or a new bicycle or whatever. So you have to keep using your old bicycle. Oh, well, that was disappointing now, wasn't it? Oh, well, I saved it, so I'm not too disappointed in how that turned out. Yeah, I record these vlogs while I'm actually driving around in the game. And there's a reason why I picked the Deviant, okay? So this is something some of you may not relate with, because some people that watch the vlog may not be fans of Grand Theft Auto Online. But there's a specific reason why I picked the Deviant, because this is a disappointment. I mean, it looks really cool, right? It looks like a really sweet looking muscle car, but its performance sucks. In other words, it's a disappointment. So yeah, there's a lot of varying ways that family can disappoint you. And sometimes you can disappoint your family. We'll get to that in a little bit. But yeah, I mean, to different levels. Siblings can disappoint you. You can disappoint your siblings. Or if you have kids, maybe you do something that disappoints them, but you were trying your best. Or maybe you're just a terrible parent. Or maybe you have terrible parents, and maybe they're a disappointment to you. Or our grandparents, or aunts and uncles, or cousins. The reality is there's always going to be somebody in your family that's going to end up being a disappointment to you for whatever rhyme or reason. Now, where else you might find disappointment is probably in school, or at work, in your career, or when you have certain goals or hopes and dreams and hobbies. And you put so much effort into, for example, being disappointed by driving this car. But going back to what we were talking about, say you put a lot of effort into a hobby, right? Or you put a lot of effort into let's start with school, like a class. Like it's a class you're really hard. It's really tough for you, really difficult. But you study your ass off, and you're hoping to get, I don't know what kind of grade you're wanting, but let's just say you don't pass the class no matter how hard you tried. That's a disappointment. You're disappointed in a lot of things. You're disappointed in the teacher for the way they graded your test. You're disappointed you're probably also disappointed at your teacher for maybe failing to teach you properly, even though you were trying to learn. And maybe you're also disappointed at yourself. Like I said, we'll get to that in a minute. So yeah, you can be disappointed in school, or there's a lot of people in school that want to make perfect grades. They want to be on the honor roll. They want to have straight A's. And whenever they make a B or a C, they end up being disappointed themselves, and sometimes even their parents are disappointed in them. Even though they passed, it might have been a really hard class for them, and they did their best, but they didn't get an A in that one class, even though they got A's in all the other classes. A, they're disappointed in themselves, and B, sometimes the parents, sadly, can be disappointed in them as well, even though it's all in hindsight, because there are kids that do far worse than their kids. I mean, prime example, if I had kids, I would be happy as long as they were making A's and B's. I mean, I would totally understand if there was a class that one of my kids, no matter how hard they tried, couldn't get an A in. It happens. We all have strengths and weaknesses. It's just the reality that we face. There's some people that are great at school and can study hard enough and make A's in all their classes, but not everybody. And sometimes you set a goal out for yourself, like for me, for example, trying to lose weight. And you hope that, like a year or 6 months from now, you work out, you try to eat right for the most part. But whenever you get to that 6 months or a year, you realize you haven't reached that goal. And there's disappointment there. Because you've tried 3 days a week to work out. You've tried to do cardio. You've tried to eat right. I mean, yeah, sometimes you partake in some snacks here or there. You don't drink alcohol anymore. You hardly ever drink soda. You mostly drink water and coffee and tea. But you still haven't lost the weight. And that can lead to disappointment because you thought that you'd actually be a lot slimmer than you are now. So, yeah, goals and a hobby that you really are into. Say you're really passionate about this hobby. But you put a lot of effort into it, and then something happens one day, and you become jaded. You become let down by the hobby. You disappointed in it for whatever rhyme or reason. Next, I could say maybe like people that maybe you don't really know, but you kind of sort of look up to can disappoint you, like so-called heroes or idols or other folks out there, philosophers, like political leaders, and our religious leaders. That too can end up being a disappointment. And you look up to these individuals for whatever rhyme or reason, and they always talk about how they're this and that, and they tell you how to live their life because they put on this song and dance how they're living a great life and how they're doing all this and all that. And then it turns out that they're not so perfect, that they've made mistakes, that they get caught in the act. Say, for example, somebody that acts like they're happily married, right? Some sort of celebrity, famous American dad. He gets accused of basically raping women, like with date rape drugs. And he ends up going to jail. A lot of Americans that looked up to him, that grew up watching him as a comedian and a sitcom father star, and in a way, kind of an additional fatherly figure to a lot of people that watched him, were disappointed in him. I'm not going to mention his name, but I think you guys kind of sort of get the idea. Or maybe a sports athlete that you admire, and they come across claiming to do it all legitimately, but at the end of the day, it turns out they were using performance enhancement drugs or something, or steroids, in order to get where they were. So it leaves the asterisk by their name in history. So that in itself is a disappointment because they clearly cheated. And with the academic issue that happened with some celebrities out in California, some female actresses, it turned out that they, kind of sort of were paying money to get their kids admissioned into school. And, it wasn't legitimate. So some money was exchanged behind the scenes. A little scheme was being worked here and there, but it came out. A lot of people have gotten in trouble about it. And some of the actresses were actually well-loved actresses. They weren't extremely popular, but they were liked, and people thought the world of them. Turns out, in real life, nah, not so much. So there have been plenty of instances where actresses and actors that people have looked up to and idolized and almost all but worshipped and thought were the best things since sliced bread, who loved their movies, who followed them on Twitter, who had almost all their movies or TV shows or whatever, have done things to disappoint us to various degrees of severity. So yeah, even so-called heroes are not infallible. They make mistakes, and people that we look up to, they can disappoint us because they're flawed. They're not perfect. Sometimes their mistakes are worse than others. Sometimes they do really, really bad things. And that leads us very disappointing in them and really jaded. Wondering if we could really look up to anybody. If there is a such thing as heroes anymore, or somebody we thought was about the people was about themselves and just trying to make money for themselves and was scamming everybody, making everybody believe that they were something when they weren't, when they were a liar and they were two-faced and they were just pulling one over on everybody. So unfortunately, yeah, there's a lot of disappointment there. And on a lighter note, TV shows and movies that we're looking forward to, our new season, can turn out to be a disappointment of a show that we like. Or a movie series. Let's say that you enjoyed this movie, right? And it's going to have a sequel. You're looking forward to the sequel. You really enjoyed that first movie, and you've been looking forward to it. You've been watching all the information, the teaser, the trailers. You got your ticket in advance. You're ready to go out. Late Thursday night or Friday night, and go sit. Like 2 hours in the theater to go watch this sequel to this movie that you were really excited about. Or maybe it's a movie based off a book that you enjoyed. But the movie turns out to be, you guessed it, a disappointment. Sadly, that happens all the time, and it happens in video games, as I was jokingly referring to the Deviant. And as Sedan mentioned earlier regarding Mafia 3, another video game that we're both fans of, that I covered from start to finish, its initial launch was relatively disappointing. And for Red Dead Online fans, so far that's been a disappointment as well. But there's always hope that maybe, just maybe, since it's an online game and there's going to continue to be updates for that game, that maybe a few months or a year from now, that game Red Dead Online will be better. Hopefully it will cease continuing to be a disappointment for us sooner rather than later. But even book sequels that you're waiting for, like you're a fan of this book series, and you've been waiting and waiting on this particular author to write a new book in that series, and yet he hasn't gone around to doing so for whatever rhyme or reason, and you're disappointed in him because you're like, hey, that series that your books are based off, it's about to be over. It's about to be over in a few weeks, and yet you still haven't gotten around to finishing another fucking book? Sorry. I didn't mean to throw an F-bomb out there. I apologize. I'm trying to keep myself a little cleaner in the vlogs. But maybe that makes you disappointed in me for that. I don't know. But I think you guys get the idea. Or with the shape of how the comic industry is. There's definitely some comic runs that are proven to be a disappointment as of late. Of course, I'm not a hardcore comic book fan or collector, but I have heard from plenty comic fans about this one series that they really liked, and the way they rebranded it, the way they relaunched it, the way they changed the characters and the backstory turned out to be disappointing. Or maybe it's a restaurant you like to eat at, like this restaurant you love going, like every week or two you go eat there. And you've been going there for a while. And then one day you go there with your friend, and then that night you're sick. And you're more sick than you ever thought you could be. I mean, it's basically coming out of both ends, that kind of sick. Food poisoning from a restaurant that you trusted, you thought had good food. And you had been eating there for quite a while, a few years. That is a major disappointment because you nearly died because you decided to eat there and give them your business. And in return, for years of being a loyal customer that showed up on a relatively regular basis, that's how you get rewarded. So yeah, that's a major disappointment. Now, a lesser disappointment is hearing about this awesome new restaurant, and you finally get around to going to this restaurant, and the food sucks. Or at least you think the food sucks. You don't like the food. Or you don't like the service. You thought the service was terrible. They got your order wrong. Or you said, like, hold the cheese on my burger, and yet they put cheese on the burger anyways. That was one of the issue my dad always had because he was allergic to cheese. True, that's a true story, by the way. But, yeah, you could definitely be disappointed in all those things, which leads to other ways of being disappointment, like beliefs, something that you used to believe in. Maybe something happens to you in your life, or you're given some information that you can no longer ignore that kind of shatters that belief. Life in general can be disappointing plenty of occasions, plenty of times. Government's always disappointing, in my opinion, as well as elected officials, society, and, of course, civilization itself. Those are kind of a giving. I get disappointed every day I read the news when it comes to a lot of those issues. But mostly I feel like we end up disappointed in ourselves because, like I mentioned earlier, we set goals for ourselves to try to do really good in school, to make the passing grade, to try and get the job, to be in this career, or to, fulfill this purpose in life that we're trying to figure out that we still have no answers to. And you have this idea of what you want to do of your life. When you're younger, you think that eventually you're going to, sooner rather than later, fall in love, meet somebody special, maybe propose to them, fall in love, propose, get married, get a house, white picket fence, have a couple kids. The typical American dream. Or the typical dream in general, I guess, that most people have, not just American, obviously. And then you find yourself years later still single, without any wife or partner or spouse or significant other, without any kids to call your own except for your pets. It can be disappointing to yourself that you haven't accomplished something that you wanted to do early on in your life. And maybe it's not that you failed. Maybe it's just that it wasn't meant to happen. Maybe you just weren't meant to have kids, or maybe you weren't meant to go into that particular career, or maybe you weren't meant to be into that hobby or friends with that person or that student or whatever. When you're disappointed in things, it can lead to a realization that maybe, just maybe, this is just not the place for you. Whether it's the particular job you're at, or whatever your so-called friend happens to be that's disappointed you too many times, or in my case, sometimes I feel like I'm a disappointment to others. Like, I don't see my sisters enough, so I do try to go see them, but sometimes I'm able to go see them even if they really want me to go hang out with them. And I can understand how they would feel like that's a disappointment. And sometimes I fear that I may be a disappointment to my grandfather, who's done a great deal for me. And I still feel like I'm trying to figure out what I'm meant to do in this life, what my purpose is. And sometimes I feel like I'm just lost. But I go forward. I do the best I can every day. And I try to make people proud of me. I try to make some sort of positive difference in the world. And I don't think I'm a bad person. I don't think I'm I don't think I'm perfect either. Far from perfect. But at the same time, I can understand if some people are disappointed in me for whatever rhyme or reason. And maybe sometimes my viewers are disappointed in me because they disagree with one of my rants, or they were expecting me to post a video one day, or they were wanting me to live stream this particular game, and I live stream a different game, and that disappoints them. So I understand that I too am capable of disappointing others to varying degrees and severities. And I try not to disappoint people, but it still happens. And like I mentioned earlier, we all have our lives going on. We all have things happening. And a lot of times when you're disappointed by somebody, it's not intentional. It's just that something else came up, and unfortunately you're the victim of it. Now, sometimes, it can really hard on you because, say, for example, you were going on a date with somebody and they ghost you. That's a disappointment. Or say you were going out with somebody and you thought it was leading towards something, and once again, you get ghosted or dumped or whatever. Nowadays, it's not dumping, it's ghosting. They just don't talk to you anymore. So yeah, that's a major disappointment. So there's a plethora of ways that you can be disappointed in this world, but at the same time, you also can disappoint others. So never forget that. You're not, the point is you're not always the victim when it comes to disappointment. And we always like to play the victim card. Like, I'm always the victim. I'm always the one who's been wrong. It's always me. Like, everyone else is out to get me. And the truth is, sometimes we all can be that person that disappointed somebody else for whatever rhyme or reason. And we just got to learn not to disappoint people. We got to learn that those that disappoint us too many times are probably not people we want to associate with. And maybe you can forgive somebody depending on how you were disappointed in them. But I don't know if you should forget what they did to you. I mean, forgive them, move on with your life, because that's the only thing you can do. You move on with your life, you forgive, never forget, learn from that, whether it was somebody or something or life in general or society or the civilization itself or government or a TV show or movies or video games that disappointed you. Learn to forgive and learn to learn not to be disappointed. Sometimes we give our hopes up too high, We get so excited about something, like a promising new relationship or a new video game or a new season of a TV show or a new movie or a new book or a potential new job. And sometimes it works out. Sometimes the hype is met, but a lot of times it doesn't turn out to be as good. Doesn't mean it's bad. It just doesn't turn out as we expected it, which is not always a bad thing. But there are definitely plenty of times when that thing we were looking forward to, that we were excited about, spending time with our friend or a family member or your son or your daughter or your grandkid doing something and then pulling a 180 and then disappointing you. They were supposed to go get a good college degree, yet they dropped out of college. They finally got a job, and then you find out they quit a few weeks later, or you find out they have other quote-unquote problems, or you find out your cousins did something that disappointed you, maybe not to you directly, but maybe they did it to other family members, and it just makes you even more disappointed in them. So disappointment is, in a way, a double-edged sword. We ourselves can be disappointed by a plethora of things, as I pointed out. But at the same time, always be mindful that you too could end up being a disappointment to someone else. But at the end of the day, the best thing to do is to try to forgive and move on. And accept that life happens. And sometimes there are just elements and things that are beyond our control and beyond your friends' control, beyond your family's control, behind, other people's control. And unfortunately, things like that do lead to disappointment.